Okay, now let's continue. The third step is to develop market segment profiles. Okay, now these market segment profiles is again basically about the similarities of the potential customers. So as discussed before, you got to show that that the members within the same market segment share similar characteristics, and if we compare to different market segments, they are different. Okay. All right. The next step is basically to evaluate the market segments, to evaluate the relevant market segments. Okay, as briefly mentioned before, when you do a proper market segmentation research, you may have you may generate 6 to 8 market segments. Now, in reality, not all market segments may be attractive for you. Okay, so there are two things that we need to look at in general. When it comes to selecting which market segments that you want to compete, there are two things that we need to consider. The first one is the attractiveness of the market, and the second one is our own capability to compete in that market. So, in other words, sometimes when we look at the market segments so attractive because the sales growth is fantastic, the industry is also growing rapidly, but there are strong competitors in that market that may reduce the level of attractiveness in that market. Okay, and then we look at internally whether we have the capability to compete in that market or not. And once we realize that now we can't compete with in that market segment because the market leaders have been protecting that industry or that market segment with strong initiatives, strong marketing campaigns, strong marketing, the other marketing activities such as new product development and so on and so forth, then the attractiveness of that market segment has dropped. Okay. Now, if you look at that, those two variables can be expanded into several variables such as sales estimate, competitive assessments, and also cost estimates. Okay, so sales estimate in here is actually generated from the market potential. So when you want to consider the market segment, you need to look at whether the market potential is attractive for you or not. Now, what do you mean by market potential? It is actually the total amount of product that customers will purchase at a certain price. Okay. In other words, those who like mathematical symbols, market potential is actually the number of potential buyer times the quantity that they will purchase times the price. So you will get the market potential. And in saying that, market potential is actually not the same as sales potential, because market potential reflects the total consumption. If all customers buy all products or all brands, that reflects the market potential, while sales potential is actually sales that we can get from the market for our company. Okay, so that reflects our market share as well. So in other words, it is the maximum percentage of market potential that a company can expect for a product. Okay, and competitive assessments, which is basically looking at the number of competitors, right? How aggressive they are. Well, in certain markets, you may find you have less than 5 competitors. Let's say you only have 3 competitors. But if they are quite strong, then you would expect that these guys would be very aggressive in the market. Okay, you need to also look at their strengths and weaknesses, and you also need to look at the market share position that they capture, whether only several competitors have a major market share, or the market is basically split into smaller market share, like the one in China market, for instance. Normally, each player captures. If you capture 5% market share in a large market like that, like China, you would be, a prominent player in that industry. Can we create a competitive marketing mix, for instance? Are we able to create a something competitive, okay, in that market segment? Or we also need to look at whether the industry is open for new competitors to come in, okay? If not, if the industry is so open, then you'll expect that more and more competitors coming into that industry, okay? And the next thing is basically about, the next thing is actually about assessing whether you can still compete successfully in that industry or not. Okay, that goes back to your capability as discussed before. And you also need to look at the cost estimate, whether the industry is going to be profitable or not for you. Then this one here is actually about the costs in that industry. So you need to look at the distinctive product features, attractive packaging design, and so on and so forth. That includes the advertising promotional, because if that industry requires you to spend top dollars in terms of advertising promotion to exist in that industry, then it also means that the cost would be quite high. And you also need to look at the prices, whether customers are willing to pay high prices or low prices, because a lot of people have been offering similar products in that market, so the price has been under pressure to be quite low. Otherwise, people, the players in that industry cannot survive, okay? Right, so there are the criteria to make decision about what market segment that you want to compete. And then you make the decision about the specific target market that you want to compete. Okay. Right. So that is basically the decision about segmentation and targeting. So again, the outcome of your segmentation is market segments, and the outcome of your targeting is actually your target market. Okay. After you do the evaluation, and you select which market segment that you want to compete in, then you have got a target market. Okay, and the next thing is actually designing your own positioning, right? What is positioning? Well, positioning is actually the way the product is defined by consumers based on its important attributes. Okay, in other words, some other scholars suggest that positioning is actually about a unique image in the customer's mind, okay? Or positioning is actually about a specific word that you capture in the consumer's mind, okay? There are several bases that that scholars suggest for positioning. You can position your brand based on features, based on specific product feature, such as you have the precision of technology, for instance. That means you're positioning your brand based on product feature. Or you can also look at the product benefit or advantage, such as price, quality, or brand reputation. If you look at Aldi, for instance, they're pretty much offering the price or affordability as an example. Or you can also position that based on the competitiveness, right, or competitive positioning, right? So you look at the positioning in the market, and you find the unique image in the market. That means you are actually using competitive positioning. Okay? This is an example of positioning using product feature. Now, how do we establish a positioning strategy? Well, marketers would normally, the first thing that marketers would normally do is to establish the positioning analysis. In doing that, marketers would normally use what we call as the perceptual mapping or positioning mapping. Okay, so this is basically showing us hotel industry for hypothetical perceptual map. Using quality and price to map all hotel brands in the market. And so if you look at that, the high quality, high price is quite crowded. A lot of brands are offering, are trying to compete in that market. And Palazzo Versace in here is basically holding the top level of price as well as top level of of quality. Okay, so if what is the next thing after we have this analysis, after we establish the analysis of the positioning? The next thing is for marketers would normally then decide which positioning that they can create. Okay. Now, if you look at that, if we go back to this positioning map, high quality, high price, maybe too crowded. So if you are in the hotel industry, assuming this is this positioning map represents the market in Australia, then the one that we can consider as no man's land is the low price, high quality type of perceptual map. If you can create that, then it will be a winning positioning for you, because you are quite unique. It's kind of offering the same thing, but except you are lower price. Okay. Hopefully that gives you an illustration in terms of creating, establishing a positioning strategy for your brand. Sometimes marketers may go to the market with wrong product positioning. That is the reason why after they do some research, they find feedback, oh, okay, it is wrong one, let's reposition that, okay? So that's what we call as the product repositioning, okay? So a number of things need to be done in terms of product repositioning. Virgin, we know that Virgin is repositioning. If you go back to the previous mapping, they were pretty much in the low, high quality, offering the same quality with cheaper price. But now they say, hey, I'm not that budget airline anymore. I'm now Virgin Australia. Therefore, I'm actually competing. I'm not competing with Jetstar anymore. I'm competing with Qantas instead. Branding, just briefly about brand. I'm not going to discuss this in more detail. Brand is actually defined as the name, term, design, symbol, or combination of those things that differentiate one product to the others. Okay, that's what I mean by brand. But what's more important about brand is not actually what we mention here as a brand. What's more important about the brand is the equity or the value of the brand, because brand is supposed to deliver, is supposed to drive consumers to buy our brand over the other brands. Okay, brand should help our consumers in making their decision, because we could identify, we could reflect what they need in our brand. Okay. And this is actually what's more important in terms of understanding the brand, the concept brand equity or brand value, which is basically knowing the brand name has, it is actually about the impact of knowing a brand name on consumers' purchase, okay? So in other words, brand equity or brand value reflects the value of the brand in influencing consumer decision making. Okay, and scholars suggest that there are four dimensions of brand equity: brand name awareness or brand awareness, if you like, which is basically reflecting the level of knowledge of the customers on our brand. The second one is perceived quality. That reflects how the quality of our brand is perceived by the customers, to what degree that our brand holds the quality that the customers expect. Okay, and the next one is brand associations, and some other scholars label them as brand image, which is basically reflecting the word that our brand is associated with. Okay, so think about a brand, either Coca-Cola or Qantas or Jetstar or Virgin Airline, right? What word do you have in mind when I mention those brands? Okay, think about it for a moment. Okay, what words do you have in mind when I mention those brands? Okay, And what about if I mention BMW, for instance? What word do you have in mind to describe BMW? Okay. And what about if I mention to you VW? What word do you have in mind when I mention that brand? Okay. So they are the brand association, assuming that that what you have in mind is in line with their strategy. That means they meet their target. Okay. And the next one is brand loyalty. To what degree consumers keep coming back to the brand, actually, all right, are loyal to that brand, okay? Now, the question is, how do we know our brand equity? Well, simple, research, okay? So we get feedback from customers to understand our brand name awareness or our brand awareness. We get feedback from customers to understand the perceived quality of our brand. We also get feedback from customers about what word do they have in mind when we mention our brand, either Coca-Cola or Jetstar or Qantas or Ryanair. I don't know whether you're aware of Ryanair or not, but if I mention Ryanair, it's interesting to find out what word you have in your mind. Okay. And Blink H2O, for instance, another brand I mentioned to you. I'm not sure whether you have heard that brand name before. So I'm interested to find out what association you have in mind when I mention Blink H2O brand. Okay. Brand loyalty, for instance, again, we do research to find out the brand loyalty of our brand. Okay. How do we ask the questions? Well, in terms of in terms of brand loyalty, you can ask whether consumers buy your product on regular basis or not when they need that kind of product category. Or you can also ask whether your consumers would recommend you to to their friends or relatives. Okay, to reflect brand loyalty. Okay. Right, this one shows the same thing basically. And this one he is actually suggested by David Ecker, one of the experts in brand management. All right, this one here is an interesting one. If you if you type on your Google search box the most valuable global brand, you'll find research by Interbrand showing top 200 brands globally. Okay, so if you look at that, Apple actually sits as #1 brand 2016. How long they would sustain that position, we'll see. Just briefly about types of brand, we have manufacturer brand or national brand. And the next one is house brand or private label. Well, these two brands basically have their own strengths and weaknesses. The national brands would normally be supported by nationwide distribution because they don't have limitation in terms of distributing their brand. And they would normally be supported by research and development team, marketing team, and also marketing campaign. Whilst home brand or house brand or private label would normally be supported by strong store presence because it is their own brand. Okay, and but they don't normally advertise and they normally compete in the industry that has the high turnover. So think about those two brands. Which one you think will win in the competition? Manufacturer's brand or house brand? Selecting a brand name, please go through your prescribed text. I'm not going to discuss this in more detail. There are some criteria to select a brand name. Protecting brand name, another one. I'm not going to discuss them, but this one here, just briefly, branding policies. Some companies have their individual branding policies. That means they, when they launch the new product, they would brand it differently. While some other companies use family branding. So if you look at Kellogg's, for instance, they use Kellogg as the brand name. Some other companies use combination of those two. If you look at Arnott's, for instance, they use Arnott's cookies, Arnott's chocolate chip cookies, for instance, as a family branding strategy, but they also use individual branding such as Arnott's Tim Tam. They also have shapes and so on and so forth. In saying that, they also have brand extensions, so they extend the brand into different product categories. Virgin brand, for instance, is in airline industry, telecommunication industry, financial services industry, as an example. Okay? And this one is not the same one as line extension. If you look at Pepsi with Max and Pepsi Next, they are the line extension. So line extension is actually using the brand name, using the same brand name for the same product category. In the case of brand extension, they are in a different product category. Co-branding, when two brands join forces. Okay, if you look at Caltex, Woolies, for instance, there are two brands, and if you go to McDonald's, you find McDonald's Oreo ice cream, for instance. There are two brands join forces. Okay. Brand licensing and so on and so forth. I'm not going to discuss this. I'm not going to discuss this in more detail. And please go through your prescribed text. Okay. All right. Now, let's discuss the next one, which is basically about the marketing mix variables. Which is basically about the marketing mix variable. Now, before we do that, what we are going to do is